You see the soldier down there? He's aiming with his gun to the road, so just keep far from the road. I think they are going to shoot now rubber bullets.
This is usually how the demos go in the West Bank. Every demo will be attacked and blocked by the army.
Usually the things that we are documented are not documented by the mainstream media. It means that it's also not a part of the narrative of this place.
There's no question that the Israeli mainstream media essentially portrays a very simple narrative that is constantly being reinforced by pretty much all the mainstream media. It's not a conspiracy, and it's not even false, but it does leave out enormous, huge swaths of context which Israelis have a very hard time seeing. Or if they see, they instinctively don't think that that's connected to why we went to war. For example, the fact that Gaza has been under some form of blockade or siege for the last 7 years. The other element that's missing is Palestinian forms of nonviolent resistance to this situation. Palestinians have diplomatic strategy of going to the UN to declare their statehood, which has been completely rejected as an anti-Israel plot by the Israeli leadership. They have weekly demonstrations in the West Bank that are unarmed and protest against the occupation in the West Bank in many towns every single week for years. Israelis don't know a thing about it. We're at a wedding of a Muslim Arab citizen of Israel and his bride, who is a Jewish Israeli woman who converted to Islam. There's an organization called Lehava, which takes upon itself to protest against all forms of assimilation, and they have got a hold of the wedding invitation, published it on Facebook, and asked people to come demonstrate against the wedding.
There's not a lot of tolerance today to criticizing the country. The Israelis feel that the world is against us anyway, so if you're airing the dirty laundry, you're actually making things worse. At the same time, I feel privileged that as an Israeli Jew, I can basically say whatever I want, because for Jews this is still a somewhat functioning democracy. For Palestinians or for asylum seeker, not so much.
Most of the media sees the army as something that is almost beyond criticism. And you can see that most of all at a time of war, and that affects the way that they cover everything. And they don't tell most of the horrifying stories that were happening in Gaza. Then how can you expect people to criticize the war when they hear no criticism of the war on the media, when they don't hear the worst of details, but only the IDF spokesman official line of saying, we avoid harming any civilians and so on and so on. So how can you become critical of the war when you don't have that information for you?
יש חשיבות גדולה מאוד לאופן שבו המידע מגיע לצרכן התקשורת, ואפשר לראות את ההבדל הגדול בין עיתונאים כמו ידיעות אחרונות וישראל היום, שפחות או יותר 70% מהישראלים קוראים, לבין עיתון כמו הארץ, שאולי 5% מבני האליטה קוראים. זה הגיליון שיצא ביום ראשון לאחר המקרה ברפיח. לאחר ניסיון החטיפה של חייל ישראלי וההפצצות המסיביות שהרגו למעלה מ100 איש, רובם אזרחים. אז פה אפשר לראות שהכותרת הראשית מוקדשת לניסיון החטיפה. פה למטה אפשר לראות שיש ידיעה שהכותרת שלה היא לפחות 123 הרוגים ברפיח. זה נחשב ממש מעשה בוגדני. להבדיל, זה גיליון של ידיעות אחרונות, מאותו יום בדיוק. כל השאר מוקדש לחטיפה. על הפלסטינאים לא כתוב כאן כלום. בעמוד 8, באמצע מאמר פרשנות, כתוב צה"ל הפציץ ברפיח, הפצצה כבדה. זה מה שיש.
So when I was in Gaza, I wrote about basically 3 different kinds of stories. One would be very much about the nature of the war and the fact that you had what essentially were the 3 fronts of modern warfare, all directed at a civilian populations. The second thing that was really trying to understand what it's like to be holed up, in your homes for that amount of time, the lack of sleep, the constant threat, the buzz of drones, and what that does to your sort of psyche. And then the third type of story was the one that we kind of chased immediately after a ceasefire was announced, and that is the impact on the ground. Obviously, in this war, the most significant difference was the shelling, because it's completely random. And there was actually, on 9/7/2, there was an infantryman who wrote a piece basically describing that, right? That there's no way to target when you shell people from tanks. But the F-16s were just as bad. You'll hear engines. This is literally the first time I've spoken about this. So you'll hear them up above, and then there's a sort of rush of air, right? And everything is sort of sucked out of the atmosphere. And you hear, just this enormous sort of boom, a sonic boom, and a freight train type sound. And it's pitch black, so you don't know what's going on, but you hear the noise. There's a moment of silence, and then this enormous explosion, right? And everybody says the same thing. It's like, if you hear the sound, you're okay. That's basically it. And that's the difference between being alive and being dead.
One of the guys here was shot with live ammunition, and from what they say here, he just fell and the soldier came and took him. By coming to these places almost every week for more than 10 years, we want actually to say these things are happening, even if you don't show it in the mainstream media. They are happening, and they are happening every week, and they are happening every day.
Why he pushed me? Why?
I think hey! I think
اخرس! أنا بقول لك اخرس!
Careful!
There is a sort of tendency to divide the conversation into a pro-Palestinian voice and a pro-Israeli voice. And if you criticize Israel, as you criticize Zionism, if you criticize the Israeli government, you're immediately a pro-Palestinian or an anti-Israeli, and vice versa. We don't do those separation to either pro that or pro this. We ask ourselves, what sort of a community we want to build here?